Hello everyone, and welcome back to Sleepy Survival. Tonight, we're stepping into a world that never really slept. A place where light, sound and motion ran long after the sun went down. You're standing on the edge of a 19th century mill town, chimneys rising through the dusk, river water thick with reflection. In a moment, you'll cross that bridge, and the night will begin. Inside, machines breathe where people should. Threads move faster than thought, and the air itself hums like a living thing, but you'll get used to it. Everyone does. The arrival. The rain has just ended when you arrive at the Telegraph office, a small brick building tucked between a print shop and a silent warehouse. The hour is somewhere between late and too late. Street lamps burn through mist, each one surrounded by a trembling halo of gaslight. Through the window, you glimpse movement. A flicker of lamplight against brass, a hand tapping out the pulse of distance. This is where the sleepless hours of an empire begin. Inside, the air smells of varnish, ink, and something metallic. The breath of current itself. Wires crawl up the walls like veins. The only true motion is the faint, tireless click of a telegraph key. The operator looks up, eyes red-rimmed but alert. You're the new night hand. You nod. Good. You'll get used to the noise. He gestures toward the empty stool, and you sit. Beneath your fingertips, the brass key feels warm, alive. Somewhere beyond the walls, a message is racing through copper threads, a thought transformed into lightning. Before you press a single key, you must listen. That's the first rule of telegraphy. The rule they never write down. You fit the headset over your ears. The world vanishes. In its place comes rhythm, a scattered choir of clicks and pauses, the voices of towns you'll never see. Liverpool, Glasgow, Calcutta, Boston, Bombay, all breathing through the same wire. To most people, it would sound like chaos. To you, it's order, a kind of music too thin for air. Outside, rain begins again, whispering against glass. Inside, another weather pattern forms, invisible storms of signal and static. You can feel the night moving. The senior operator leans over your shoulder, watching your hands. Every message is a heartbeat, he says. Every break in the line is a death. You nod, though you're not sure whether he's joking. The night shift begins at 9. The day crew leaves. Their boots fade down the corridor. The door shuts, and silence becomes company. 4 of you remain. The senior man who listens more than he speaks. The supervisor, a woman in a grey dress with ink on her wrists. The young runner who delivers telegrams through fog. And you, the newest pulse in the network. The supervisor pours coffee into tin cups. No sleep, she murmurs. The line tells you when to stop. The lamps hiss. Shadows bend across the floor like cables coming to life. You start tapping, slowly at first, then with the steady rhythm of language disguised as percussion. Click, pause, click, click. Somewhere far away, someone answers. The empire at your fingertips. Through these wires runs more than chatter. You're carrying news, business, weather, births, wars. The entire nation's heartbeat, shrunken to a pulse of current. Somewhere north, a ship is reported safe. Somewhere south, a minister's speech travels faster than his own horse. In colonies half a world away, telegraph lines hum through deserts and jungles, binding distant voices into a single sleepless conversation. The empire used to move at the speed of wind and sail. Now it moves at the speed of thought, and you, a single operator in a modest room, or its nervous system. The language of light. At midnight, the lamps begin to falter. The oil sinks low, glass blackening with soot. You trim a wick, careful not to break rhythm. The flame steadies, small, stubborn, human. In the corner, the battery jars glow faintly blue. It's the same light you've seen in summer storms, captive lightning, quiet and waiting. The supervisor calls it the moonlight of invention. Outside, the town sleeps. Inside, wires whisper like 1,000 sleepless minds. Messages leap from post to post across the countryside, flashing over rooftops, down tunnels, under riverbeds. They reach relay stations where other operators, men and women you'll never meet, catch them mid-flight, translate them into dots and dashes, and send them onward again. No single person ever sees the full message. You are all fragments of one great sentence. The world is still writing. The body learns, hours pass. The muscles in your hands adapt. You no longer think of letters, only rhythm. Dot dot dash, dash, dot dot. Each sound a flicker of light in your brain, connecting thought and motion faster than speech ever could. You begin to feel it, the hum. It's not in the wire, but in you. When you close your eyes, the rhythm continues behind your eyelids, steady as a pulse. You realize you haven't spoken aloud in hours. No one has. Words are slower than current. The visitors at 2 a.m. around 2. The door opens. A boy from the postal service brings a stack of new messages and a single loaf of bread wrapped in paper. He stands in the doorway, eyes wide at the machinery, and whispers. It's like the stars are talking. The supervisor smiles, takes the bread, and offers him a coin. He shakes his head, awed, and disappears back into the night. You think about what he said. He's right, in a way. Each spark that jumps a relay is a star fallen to earth. Small, bright, temporary. The Telegraph has turned the night sky upside down. Now the constellations live underground. The fault in the line at 3:30. The rhythm breaks. A long dash falters into silence. The senior operator frowns. North line's gone dead. He lifts the receiver, listens, taps, listens again. Nothing. Someone somewhere has cut the current. Storm, damage, or human error. Without the wire, half the country is deaf. You fetch the repair kit, rubber gloves, a spool of copper, a lantern. The supervisor sighs. You've not had your break yet. You shake your head. There's no time. Outside, the street is a narrow tunnel of fog. You follow the line down the road until it disappears into a wooden pole wet with rain. Climbing carefully, you find the fault a single broken link, glinting like a wound in the moonlight. You twist the wires together, breathe white mist, and watch as the line sparks alive again, a soft electric heartbeat returning to the world. When you come down, your hands smell of ozone and winter. The hour before dawn, by 5, the city begins to stir. Chimneys exhale, carts rattle, church bells clear their throats. You've been awake so long that fatigue feels like clarity. Each click of the key sounds distant, almost holy. Your mind drifts between meanings, message and music, noise and prayer. The supervisor walks past, sets a cup of cold coffee by your elbow. Almost done, she says. Her voice is hoarse but kind. You return before darkness has fully settled. Because the night, once heard, never quite leaves you. The lamps have been trimmed, the windows cracked open for breath, and the air hums faintly with current. Outside, the city exhales its evening smoke. Inside, you are once again part of its pulse. The first thing you notice is the quiet rhythm already running, an invisible heartbeat inside the wire. Click, pause, click, click. The day operators have gone, their cups still line the shelf, half rings of tea drying into hieroglyphs. You hang your coat, roll up your sleeves, and settle before the brass key that has become a kind of mirror. It doesn't reflect light, it reflects time. Messages are already waiting. You press the switch, the line awakens. Every contact point between metal and skin feels almost intimate. Each sound is a fragment of a conversation happening hundreds of miles away. Somewhere in the darkness, two lovers argue, a banker demands confirmation, a railway requests clearance. You are all three for a breath of a second. The wire never judges, only delivers. The telegraph network is not an invention, it's an anatomy. Each pole is a bone, each wire, a vein, each operator, a heartbeat. From Edinburgh to Dover, from Bombay to Boston, the system pulses, millions of signals migrating through copper, like migrating birds of light. It's beautiful if you forget the cost. Every second of perfect rhythm means a worker, somewhere, hasn't blinked in hours. The empire's veins are fed by insomnia. You catch yourself smiling at the thought, the entire world kept alive by sleeplessness. Progress is nothing more than exhaustion made permanent. At 10:30, the messages begin to blur. Your mind separates sound from meaning, but your fingers keep answering. You become a ghost in your own body, conscious only of movement. Between bursts of code, you hear stray human noises through the wire. A cough, a laugh, a sigh too long to be mechanical. They're not supposed to transmit, yet somehow they do, residue of breath carried by current. You realize the network remembers more than messages. It remembers people. There's a superstition among operators. If you listen long enough, you'll hear the dead in the static, those who died at their desks, hearts stilled in rhythm with the last dash. You never believed it before tonight, but now every pause feels like a held breath that might never exhale. The room without sleep, midnight. No clock is needed, the air itself thickens. The oil in the lamps trembles when you move too quickly. The smell of metal and wool grows dense, like rain trapped indoors. The supervisor makes her slow rounds, whispering small encouragements. Steady now, watch your spacing, breathe. She carries the same authority as a nurse in a ward of patients who refuse to rest. You glance at the others. One operator gently tapping his key with the precision of a pianist. Another staring at the coil, lips silently repeating each letter. Everyone's eyes shine in lamplight, reflections of the same invisible fire. You realize none of you are truly awake, just held upright by electricity. When you shift in your seat, the floorboards answer with a long, slow creak, the ghost of an older rhythm, wood remembering the weight of machines that once thundered here before the wires arrived. Everything that ever lived in this town still vibrates, somewhere in the air. Tonight's traffic is heavy. Storms in the north, troop movements whispered through official channels, birth announcements in trembling Morse. A code from London arrives. Confirm cable integrity. India line unstable. The senior operator decodes it aloud. His voice cracks with awe. Do you realize, he says, we're speaking through the sea itself? He means the undersea cables, those iron arteries stretched across ocean floors, connecting continents through darkness. You picture it, black water above, pressure like a god's hand, miles of copper sleeping on silt, carrying words at the speed of thought, fish brushing against empire, whales hearing every secret. Someone once said the ocean was the world's last silence. That was before we taught it to talk. Women of the wires at 1 a.m. A change of rhythm, higher, sharper, faster. The next station's operator is a woman. You can tell by her touch on the key. She sends with a kind of grace no manual can teach. Swift, precise, musical. Most people think the Telegraph belonged to men in waistcoats. They forget the night belonged to women. While factories slept, telegraph offices filled with female operators, steady, efficient, invisible. They were trusted with the empire's secrets, but rarely with its praise. Their wages were half, their shifts twice as long, yet the wires moved only because they stayed. You imagine her now far away in another city, hair-pinned, collar wilted, fingers bleeding from contact with the key. If you tap your signal just so, she might recognize you. A conversation of ghosts disguised as duty. You send acknowledged, line clear, good night. She replies, good night, steady work, no names, no need. The wire carries all the intimacy the world forbids. The storm signal at 2:30. The signal weakens. The clicks slow. The rhythm limps. Outside thunder rolls far yet approaching. You step to the window. Over the river, lightning sketches the city in pale bone lines. Every telegraph pole flashes for an instant, each tip crowned in blue fire. It looks like the skeleton of the world illuminated from within. The supervisor orders all operators to ground their sets. You flip the switch, severing current from key. For the first time all night, the room is silent. The absence is unbearable. In that pause you hear the storm's true sound, rain hammering slate, wind through iron, thunder, echoing off brick. Natural electricity, reminding human electricity, who came first. When the surge passes, you reconnect the line. The signal returns, faint but alive. You whisper, still here, as if the wire could answer. Perhaps it does. The next click sounds almost grateful. The visitor near dawn, footsteps approach the door. Not the guard, not the messenger. A stranger. He introduces himself as an inspector from the central line. He carries a notebook and the unmistakable arrogance of daylight authority. He glances around the room, unimpressed by exhaustion or devotion. Productivity, he asks. The supervisor gestures to the ledgers, neat as scripture, messages transmitted 684 since dusk. He nods without emotion, scribbles something, and remarks, efficiency could improve. When he leaves, the room exhales in unison. The wires hum again, quieter, almost sullen. progress never thanks its hands. The moment of error at 4 a.m. Your focus slips. One dash becomes two. A single mistaken pulse alters the entire message. The reply comes almost instantly. Repeat. Unkill transmission. Your throat tightens. The key trembles beneath your fingers. You correct. Slowly, carefully. A simple error, one flick of metal, can change peace into war, payment into loss, love into farewell. You understand now why some operators never speak even after they leave the office. They've already said too much to the world. When the confirmation arrives, you exhale for the first time in minutes. The supervisor catches your eye and gives a small nod, the night's only approval. The sound of distance. You begin to notice patterns within the noise. Tiny hesitations between clicks, regional accents hidden inside tempo. Scottish stations send with longer pauses. French ones with abrupt bursts, American ones with bravado. It's as if every nation has its own heartbeat, audible only through metal. Sometimes when the traffic thins, you listen not for meaning but for tone. It tells you who is tired, who is new, who is lonely. A telegraphist can tell more about a stranger's life from rhythm than from words. You wonder what your own rhythm reveals. Probably weariness, probably devotion, between messages. At the briefest lull before dawn, you rest your wrists. The keys lie still, the lamps almost spent. You hear the building itself settling. Wood popping, rain dripping, glass sighing. You realize the telegraph room isn't a workplace. It's a heart chamber. And you, for this brief century, are its blood. Outside, somewhere beyond the fog, the first train of morning will soon begin its run. It will follow tracks that were once silent until you told them to move. The first light again, 5:30. A pale film of dawn leaks through the windows, turning every brass surface to gold. The messages slow, the operators blink more often, breaking trance. The supervisor closes her ledger with a soft clap. Hold the last dispatch, she says. Let the morning have it. You send one final line. Traffic complete. All stations steady. End of night. The reply arrives from every direction at once, as if the whole network was sighing together. Acknowledged, then silence. You lift your fingers from the key. For a moment they hover, refusing to accept stillness. Then the ache sets in, and the world returns to gravity. The walk home when you step outside. The sky is a washed-out watercolor of blue and pewter. The streets gleam with last night's rain. Smoke rises from early chimneys. A milk cart rattles past, the horse steaming like a small locomotive. Behind you, the telegraph office hums faintly, as if still dreaming. You realize the city will never sleep again. Not truly. It has learned your rhythm. The telegraph has become its heartbeat, and you, its unwilling musician. You pull your coat tighter, begin the walk home and listen, not to silence but to the faint echo of your own pulse, trying to keep time with the world's reflection. They'll call this century the age of connection. They won't mention the cost in hours, eyesight, or solitude. Every invention needs someone to keep it awake. You think of the woman down the line, the boy with the bread, the hum in the wire that feels like memory. You think of all the words that passed through your hands without ever touching you. Perhaps that's what being modern means, to speak endlessly and never be heard. Yet as dawn deepens, a quiet satisfaction settles. You were there. You kept the current alive. You stitched one more night into the endless cloth of communication. And though you will sleep soon, the wire will not. Somewhere already, another operator is taking your place. Hands poised, ears ready, heart tuned to the same electric rhythm that binds you all. The world, still half dreaming, begins to hum again. A language without breath, a prayer without priest. And if you listen closely, you can hear it even now. The steady, ceaseless heartbeat of a wired nation, still awake beneath the morning sky. The night hasn't ended, though the clock insists it's well past morning. You know better. There are no mornings in the telegraph room. Only lighter shades of dark. The lamps hiss softly, their flames shivering in the drafts that slip through the window frames. The air has grown heavy, thick with a kind of metallic quiet. The silence that lingers after too much talking. Every desk smells of oil and graphite. Every message has already gone where it must. And yet the wire keeps breathing. You stay. because leaving would mean learning how to sleep again. And you're not sure you remember how. The breath of the line, you rest your head on folded arms, not sleeping, only listening. The receiver crackles faintly, random static at first, then rhythm, click, pause, click, click, not fast enough to be traffic, not slow enough to be weather, something in between. You straighten, touch the key. No one has signaled. The main line should be empty. Still, the wire hums alive, restless, whispering without instruction, a phantom circuit, the network talking to itself. You note the hour in the ledger, 5:42, irregular transmission on coastal line. You pause before writing the next part. Instead, you simply listen. The pattern is strange but familiar. Half phrases, broken words, fragments of letters without context. C, E, they form nothing you recognize, yet you feel the meaning like pressure under skin. Could be bleed over from the northern loop. The senior operator mutters, not looking up from his notes. He's heard it too. Everyone has, at some point. They call it dead air, the ghost field of the network, where abandoned lines still hum, wires that were cut but never forgotten. The lost circuit. When the telegraph age first spread across the empire, it did so recklessly, strings of wire over marshes, deserts, mountains, sea. Some lines never worked, others fell to rust or storm. But current, like memory, rarely dies completely. It lingers, it echoes. The physicists have explanations: residual charge, parasitic induction, atmospheric interference. But the operators, the ones who sit through the long nights, know better. It's not interference, it's persistence. You adjust the tuning coil, narrowing the signal. The faint rhythm sharpens. You can almost imagine a voice beneath the clicks, a kind of mechanical breathing. It feels close, too close. You whisper, "Who's there?" before realizing how foolish it sounds. The wire doesn't answer, but the room seems to lean closer, as if listening back. The memory of static. You once heard an older operator say that every line remembers its first message, that if you could strip away the layers of sound, you'd find the beginning still repeating underneath, like a ghost etched into glass. You thought it poetic nonsense. Now you're not so sure. The pattern on the wire has settled into something steady. 4 clicks, a pause, 2 more. It repeats every 30 seconds, with small hesitations like breathing through pain. You begin writing it down. The letters form nonsense, ORENTOL. But when you read them aloud, they sound like a name you once knew. You erase it quickly. The operator's superstition. The telegraphists have their own religion, born of sleeplessness and repetition. Every office has a shrine of sorts, a burnt-out coil, a broken key, a glass battery bottle, still holding the smell of sulfur, relics of the faith. They whisper rules to each other, never mock a failed transmission, never call the line dead, never answer a signal that has no origin point. You've broken all 3 tonight. You glance toward the far corner where the unused relay sits, still connected to the main trunk. Its arm moves once, faint as breath, though no power feeds it. A single dust mote drifts upward in the lamplight. The sound it makes, just a tiny tap, is enough to raise every hair on your arm. The voice without origin near 6 o'clock. The storm returns. Rain taps against the roof in slow rhythm, echoing the clicks in the receiver. You adjust your headset. The signal is back. Clearer now. Faster. Hello? Hello? Is this? Hello? You freeze. It's not possible. The station code attached to the signal, C07, belongs to a relay decommissioned 5 years ago. Flooded, abandoned. The supervisor leans over your shoulder, frowning. Probably old copper still connected underground, she says, but her voice is too careful. She doesn't believe it either. The message repeats. Each time the word hello grows slower, softer, as if the sender is tiring. Then silence. You try not to imagine what kind of silence exists at the other end of a drowned telegraph pole. The weight of the air after dawn. The rain stops. A pale light slides through the cracked windows, pooling on the floorboards. Everyone else has gone. You stay to file the night reports. Your hand aches. Your eyes burn, but your ears refuse to let go of the hum. The empty office seems larger now, like a cathedral whose god has left but whose echoes remain. The keys, still gleaming with fingerprints, look like relics. You catch your reflection in the glass of the receiver. A face thinner than you remember, skin ghosted pale by lamplight, eyes rimmed with blue. You look like a messenger who's forgotten what message he was meant to deliver. The long echo that night. At home you still hear it. The phantom rhythm. Not in your ears but behind your ribs. Click, pause, click, click. You think about how the world has changed since the first wire was strung, how distances collapsed, how silence became a luxury, how the dark was filled with voices, and yet you wonder what the wire cost to stay alive this long. You light a candle and imagine the network sprawling across the map, thin veins of copper, each one pulsing faintly, a nervous system without a body. If you could follow the current to its source, you'd find what? A machine? A person? Or something that can't tell the difference anymore. The night of questions, you return to the office the next evening. The supervisor eyes you curiously. Back so soon? You nod. I want to check the northern trunk. Make sure it's clear. She shrugs. Don't start seeing ghosts in the wire, she says. Half joking, you don't answer. You simply take your seat, align the papers, and reconnect the headset. The first hour is ordinary. Railway dispatches, market confirmations, a long string of meteorological codes from the coast. Then, faintly, under the regular traffic, you hear it again. A slower rhythm now, older, measured like a pulse. This time you decide not to ignore it. You tap gently, identify station, a pause. Then, against every law of physics, the reply arrives. C07, the flooded station. You find the record in the ledger. Coastal station C07, operational 1872-1879, flooded by winter surge. 3 lost. Names follow. You recognize one, the same carved faintly on the wall beam near your desk. You touch the letters. The wood feels warmer than it should. You realize the wire doesn't just carry electricity. It carries memory. It carries residue. What happens when a memory learns how to answer? The experiment. At midnight, curiosity wins. You switch the connection directly to the abandoned coastal circuit. The receiver hums like a throat clearing. The key warms under your fingers. You tap. Are you still there? Silence. Then, faintly, always. You swallow hard. The rhythm behind the letters sounds familiar. Your own hand's pace, but reversed, like an echo speaking first. You try again. Who are you? Who are you? Comes the reply. The lamps flicker. Outside, wind lashes the river into silver ribbons. You want to disconnect, but your hand won't move. Every telegraphist knows this feeling. The gravity of conversation that shouldn't exist. You send one final line. We hear you. The key stays warm for a long time afterward. The operator's dream sleep comes late. You dream of wires stretched over oceans, each one humming softly like a cello string. Beneath them, a city of drowned poles rises from the seabed, their glass insulators glinting like lanterns. Between the ruins, people walk, operators without names, hands glowing faintly with electricity. They look up as you pass. One lifts a finger to her lips and whispers through the water. The line never dies, only listeners do. You wake before dawn, heart hammering, hands twitching as though still sending. The morning feels wrong, too still, too clean. Even silence seems artificial now. The letter, a week later, you receive a package with no return address. Inside, a section of telegraph wire, coiled neatly, ends capped in wax. No note, just a faint oily scent, like seaweed and metal. You hold it under lamplight. Tiny scratches along its length form a pattern, dots and dashes burned into the copper itself. You translate automatically. It reads, "Hello, we remember." You wrap it in cloth and place it in the drawer beside your old notebooks. Some memories don't belong to one lifetime alone. The archive of noise over the following months. Others begin to report similar incidents. Faint transmissions from defunct stations, codes no one sent, names of operators, long dead, appearing in traffic lists. The newspapers call it atmospheric recurrence. The technicians blame solar influence, but the night workers, those who live in the hum, have a simpler word: haunting. You start keeping a second logbook, separate from the official ledger, a record not of efficiency, but of echoes. Each entry shorter, softer. June 3rd, a woman's laugh through the line. June 10th, sound like footsteps between relays. June 12th, whisper. still working. You write them down because someone must, because even ghosts deserve accurate transcription. The silence that speaks years pass. The telephone arrives. The great network begins to thin, replaced by new voices, new wires, faster signals. Offices close one by one. You remain, not out of duty, but out of attachment. You've lived too long inside the current to hear life without it. When the final dismantling order arrives, you volunteer for the night shift, one last vigil. By midnight, the others have gone. Only you remain, sitting by the key. The air smells of dust and memory. You listen, and there it is, faint but faithful. The same 4 clicks and 2 pauses that started everything. You smile. You tap once, gently. Good night. The line answers, rest easy. The last spark fades. The world exhales. And for the first time in a century, the network sleeps. Reflection. The living built the telegraph to conquer distance. The dead turned it into a home. Every wire ever strung carried 2 messages. One for the world that wanted to move faster, and one for the world that wished it could slow down. You think of those forgotten stations, Saint 07, and all the rest still humming faintly beneath the earth, keeping the rhythm long after the operators have gone. And you think of yourself, sitting here in the quiet, finally understanding what all the signals meant. They weren't about information, they were about connection. The fragile, electric thread that runs through everything that refuses to be forgotten. The wire never truly dies. It only waits for someone to listen. The telegraph house has always been louder than the streets around it. Tonight, it is not. Something in the rhythm has shifted. Not broken, just slower, deliberate. As if the line itself has grown cautious about what it carries. You arrive early before the lamplighter makes his round. The moon still low behind the factory roofs. The air tastes of tin and dew. From inside comes a hush you've never heard before. The hush of work that has outlived its noise. The new shift. 2 new operators sit where the veterans used to. Their coats are modern, their collars too clean. One hums softly between messages. A tune you don't recognize. The other counts the pauses like a clock. Traffic's light tonight, the younger one says, glancing at the blank ledger. He says it the way a man might say nothing's wrong while holding a cracked cup. You nod, hang your hat, take your seat at the far bench, the same station you've used for 20 years. The key is new, plated and delicate, too thin for real weight. Your hand misses the resistance of brass worn smooth by decades of use. You test the circuit. The line hums obediently, but beneath the hum you swear you hear breathing. The absence of voices messages used to overlap like rain on tin. The chatter of stations along the coast. The slow commerce of words stitched from one town to another. Now the intervals between signals are long enough to think whole thoughts. You realize how strange silence sounds when you've spent a lifetime measuring it. The younger operator yawns. Can't sleep in the dormitory anymore, he mutters. Too quiet. You almost laugh. Once quiet was the thing every worker begged for. The rare mercy after shift. Now quiet feels heavier than exhaustion. He asks what it was like before the upgrades. You tell him the truth. It sounded alive. He nods politely but doesn't understand. How could he? He was trained by diagrams, not by fatigue. The empty trunk line near midnight. The supervisor sends you to check the trunk connection. The main coil room lies in the back, behind a door that sticks. You push it open. The hinges groan like something remembering pain. Inside a row of silent switchboards. Their faces blank, sockets unplugged. A century of communication condensed to furniture. Dust lies in sheets on the floor. When you brush it aside, footprints appear. Too small to be yours, too fresh to be forgotten. A draft slides along the corridor. It smells faintly of ozone. You could swear you hear tapping beyond the wall. Slow, deliberate, unhurried. Someone sending from nowhere. You hold your breath. The pattern stops. Silence settles again, thick enough to feel. The room of mirrors. They've installed mirrors where windows used to be, to make the place look larger. At night the reflections multiply the lamps. 100 small suns floating in copper darkness. You sit alone, surrounded by yourself at every angle. Each reflection looks busier than the real you. each one still moving its hands after you've stopped. The telegraph key glows dull red under your fingers. Its heat is comfort and warning both. You imagine that, if the mirrors could speak, they'd repeat every message ever sent from this room. A chorus of half-finished goodbyes, repeated forever by glass. You almost say one aloud just to see if the echo would answer. The unsent message. There is a drawer in the far cabinet marked pending deliveries. You've never opened it. Tonight you do. Inside, dozens of message slips folded neatly. Transmissions that never found a destination. Codes without a receiver. Words waiting for ears that no longer exist. Most are simple. Missed rail notices. Unclaimed orders. But one catches you. A short line, unsigned, written in your own handwriting. Tell them we heard. You can't remember writing it. But you know the moment, years ago, that strange night when the drowned station answered back. You fold the slip again, return it to the drawer. Some debts are already paid in silence. The new voices around too. A faint tapping resumes. The young operator straightens. That line's supposed to be retired, he says. You motion for quiet. The pattern is slow, almost cautious. It forms letters, H-E-L-L-O, the same word that haunted your career. He stares at you. What station is that? You answer, none that are listed. The sound continues. This time it spells S-T-A-Y. He removes his headset. That's enough for me, he mutters, forcing a laugh that doesn't reach his eyes. He leaves the room. You remain. The wire hums, patient as breath. The weight of remembering at 3. You begin to think the noise has stopped. You begin to think you imagined it. Then the signal returns, one steady tone that fills the air without variation. Not Morse, not message, just presence. You lay your palm against the receiver. It vibrates faintly, like a heartbeat through metal. For a moment you see the faces of every operator you ever worked beside. Men and women lit by lamplight, hair tied back, eyes fixed on invisible voices. Their hands rise and fall like prayer. The sound isn't coming from the wire at all. It's memory, rehearsing itself. The clock without numbers. When the clock strikes 4, its chime stumbles. A skipped note, then another. You look up and realize the hands have frozen. Only the second needle trembles, pulsing in place. You laugh quietly. Even time has adopted the rhythm of the wire. The supervisor enters to check the shift. She asks if the trunk line's clear. You say yes. You don't mention the voice that said stay. She eyes you the way people look at machines that might still be useful. Then she nods and leaves. The door closes. The air ripples once, then smooths again. The inheritance by dawn. The light through the cracked windows is colorless, almost blue. The new operators will arrive soon. You begin to clean the desk, papers stacked, wires coiled, pens laid in parallel lines. Among the tools lies a small wooden spool, same type used decades ago. Someone left it there, recently varnished, initials carved into the rim, Ing C07. You pick it up. It's heavier than expected. Inside faint scratching, as if something alive sleeps within the hollow core. You set it down carefully, whisper the only benediction the trade allows. Clear line, the last transmission. The receiver lights once, faint amber, then fades. A final burst of static crosses the board like a sigh. It forms no letters, only rhythm. You recognize it. 4 clicks, pause, 2 clicks. You tap back the same pattern. The answer arrives. Immediate, tender, inevitable. Then nothing. The silence that follows is not empty. It's full, as though all the world's messages have finally arrived, and none of them need repeating. The walk home outside. The streets are slick with dawn frost. Telegraph poles throw long shadows across the cobblestones, black lines stretching toward the river. Birds perch on the wires. The first voices of morning. You walk beneath them, your breath rising in small clouds. For once you hear no echo of work, no phantom rhythm, only your own footsteps and the slow unfurling of day. At the bridge, you pause. The water below is calm, smooth as glass. You wonder how many messages have passed through it, how many have drowned in its patience. You whisper to the reflection. Still working. The current glints once, a shimmer like acknowledgement, then keeps moving. The room of silence weeks later, the office closes for renovation. You are invited to attend the ceremonial shutdown. A handful of journalists arrive, a brass plaque is unveiled. They speak of progress, of heritage, of preservation. No one mentions the voices. No one mentions the long nights. You stand at the back, hands folded, watching. When the speeches end, they let you throw the final switch. You do it slowly. The lamps fade, one by one until only daylight remains. The walls breathe once, exhale dust, then stillness. The crowd applauds the quiet. Reflection later. Walking home, you realize the sound has not left you. It has simply changed shape. Now it lives in rhythm of footsteps, in heartbeat, in the tick of a distant clock that still runs even when unseen. You think of all the operators, the living, the gone, the ones who never signed their names, and you understand what bound them. Not the work, not the wage, the listening, the courage to sit through darkness and still believe a voice might call. That, you think, is what progress really means. Learning to hear the world even when it whispers. You reach your door. Inside, your small room waits, thread on the wall trembling slightly, candle unlit. You sit, as you always have, and write a final line in your notebook. The line endures. Outside, somewhere beyond the river, a faint hum answers, not wire, not wind, but the long echo of human patience. And for the first time you understand the world itself has become the operator. It listens, it waits, it keeps the silence alive. Dawn on the wires, you walk home through streets, the color of tin. The telegraph lines stretch above you, dark strings etched against the pale sky. They hum faintly in the thawing wind, music made by distance. Every droplet of dew clings to the wires like beads of glass, catching sunrise and releasing it one shimmer at a time. The town is half awake, milk carts rattle. A newspaper boy shouts yesterday's headlines into today's air. Behind you, the office lamp still burns, a single gold eye in the dim blue of morning. You imagine the signals still traveling, rolling through the poles, crossing fields where no one listens anymore. They pass over sleeping farms, half-frozen rivers, long stretches of silence where the world forgets to answer. You whisper into the wind as if the lines could still carry it. Are you listening? The wires tremble once, then settle. Where the river begins, by the time you reach the bridge, the sun has cleared the chimney tops. The river below moves slowly, ice breaking apart in dull metallic plates. It looks almost like the wires, same color, same motion, carrying messages of its own. You rest your hand on the railing and think of how often you've compared the two. The first telegraph builders did too. They called the wires rivers of thought, and sometimes in the dark, they believed they could hear them whisper. Below, the current coils around the pier stones, pulling threads of light into its eddies. You drop a small pebble and watch the ripples spread outward, overlapping like sound waves. For a second, it feels as though the water is replying, slowly but in perfect rhythm. The voices underwater. In the earliest days of the line, they ran cables along riverbeds, copper twisted through mud and silt, guarded by tarred hemp and hope. Every storm meant another break, every thaw, another repair. You picture the divers, helmeted men descending through cold green light, finding the wounded line by touch, one hand on the river, one on the nation's pulse. They said you could hear voices under there if you listened too long. Messages meant for others, drifting into your skull like songs without words. You have never been underwater that way, yet you know the sound. It is the same one that hums behind your ribs when the night is too still, the residue of conversation that never quite ended. The new age of transmission at the coffee house. They talk of wireless, of sparks that leap through air itself, no longer needing the river, the wire, or the patience of metal. Some claim that the future will be silent, clean, bright, unburdened by the hiss of static. You stir your drink and watch steam rise like a signal in disguise. You know better. No matter how pure the invention, someone must still listen. Every miracle eventually requires a human ear. Through the window you see a boy in the street, holding a small crystal set, earpiece, pressed tight. His face is rapt, half terror, half awe. He hears the invisible. You remember your first night shift, and the way the Morse clicks became a heartbeat, then a language, then something close to prayer. By afternoon, the workmen arrive to check the lines. They climb poles with the easy rhythm of those born to height. Belts jangling, boots leaving marks on the tarred wood. From below, their figures look like notes on a staff. The foreman waves, you wave back. He shouts something about new insulation and modern efficiency. You nod, though you can barely hear. One of them taps a wire and listens. For a moment you envy him. To place your ear against the nation's spine, to feel its vibration through bone that was once your daily work. Now it belongs to maintenance. Progress has demoted, listening to a task. The archive of static that evening, you visit the old relay shed. It sits behind the mill canal, half swallowed by ivy. Inside, the air smells of dust, oil, and the peculiar sweetness of forgotten electricity. Shelves line the walls, spools of wire, cracked glass insulators, boxes of punched tape rolled like sleeping serpents. In the center stands the abandoned switchboard, its surface freckled with corrosion. You press a key, gently. A faint pop answers, followed by a slow decay into silence. There is no circuit left, yet something stirs, a ghost voltage perhaps, or the echo of a once living current refusing to die. You imagine every message that ever passed through here. Births, deaths, battles ended, ships sunk, lovers reconciled by dots and dashes, all gone into static now, layered like sediment at the bottom of time. The operator's dream. That night you dream of standing knee-deep in a river of light. Each current carries words, brief flashes of conversation, reports, confessions. They brush against your legs, then slip away downstream. Above you, instead of stars, telegraph poles rise into the sky. Their wires hum softly, stretching upward forever. You reach to touch one, and it shivers like skin. When you wake, the hum persists. You realize it's real. The early morning wind moving through the city wires again. The dream has followed you home. Listening lesson after breakfast, you walk back toward the post office. The young clerk on duty offers you tea, asks what the old days were like. You tell her that machines once spoke in rhythm, not in tone. That listening used to be a craft. She laughs lightly and says, "Now the machines listen for us." You nod, but keep watching the sounder on her desk. A new electric model, all silver and confidence. It ticks once, twice, then stops. She doesn't notice. You do. The silence afterward is the shape of all you've learned. The bridge of echoes. At dusk you return to the bridge. The river runs darker now, carrying thin ribbons of reflected firelight from the town lamps. Above it, the wires gleam faintly red, like veins beneath transparent skin. You close your eyes and listen. Through wind, through distance, something faint emerges, a rhythmic sequence, not quite Morse, not quite imagination. It could be an old message repeating itself, a loop left running in some forgotten relay, or perhaps it's just the river, adopting the voice of what once leaned over it. Either way, you listen until the sound fades into the wider pulse of night. Reflection, the living current. As you walk home, you understand that no signal ever truly ends. Energy merely learns new routes. The same current that once carried your hand across a brass key now warms the lamps in strangers' windows, powers the trams that hum past corners where you used to wait. The river, the wire, the air, they are one body now. Each remembers a version of you, the listener, the translator, the quiet keeper of a nation's half-spoken heart. You reach your door, open it, and pause. The house is dark, peaceful, but the hum remains not loud, not near, just steady, like a faraway sea. You smile. Somewhere out there the current still moves. It doesn't need you anymore, and that is the truest kind of survival. You close the door, and the sound follows you softly into sleep. Night returns, evening again. The town settles into its slow, mechanical hush. Windows bloom with lamplight, one by one, like cautious stars. You step back into the office as if crossing a border. The smell greets you first. Metal, dust, and something faintly sweet, like old ink. The bench is still warm from the last shift. The key waits beneath your fingers, brass dulled by 1,000 other hands. Outside, the wires hum faintly against the wind. Inside, a single bulb trembles with a low, patient pulse. You sit, close your eyes and listen. It starts as always, random ticks, stray static, the murmur of circuits stretched over miles. Then the rhythm sharpens, the nation waking again through its nerves. You answer, almost without thinking. First contact, the call sign comes from the north. Steady, deliberate. You tap back your own, and the conversation begins. Short bursts, pauses, questions, acknowledgements. At first it's all business. Weather reports, line tests, delivery confirmations. But in the slow hours between traffic, the messages loosen. How's the rain where you are? Light now? You? Not rain. Just river. No names, never names. Only call letters and rhythm. Yet in time, rhythm becomes personality. You know the quick operators by their clipped confidence, the tired ones by their extra dots, the lonely ones by the way they overspace their pauses. It's astonishing how much humanity can fit between two clicks of a key. Learning to speak without speaking before the telegraph. Words belong to breath and ink. Now they belong to impulse. Electric, instant, stripped of tone. You learn to translate silence into timing, mood into spacing. The fastest operators weren't always the best. The best were the ones who could make feeling travel through brass. A missed beat could mean irritation, affection, or grief, depending on the listener. Sometimes, at 2 a.m., when the lines were clear and the world asleep, whole conversations unfolded that could never exist on paper. Tiny acts of trust encoded in rhythm. You once spent an entire shift exchanging nothing but fragments of poetry, dashes standing in for breath, dots for heartbeat. No one else could have read it. You called it the quietest language ever spoken. The South Line operator. There was one you never met, but knew better than most. South Line 13, a woman, though you weren't told at first. Her style gave her away. Light, precise, musical. Her transmissions always ended with an unnecessary dot, a signature that wasn't a signature. For months you relayed messages through her station. Every time her rhythm crossed the wire, you felt the tone of the night change, steadier, warmer. One winter storm, when the northern lines froze and signals wavered, she stayed on past dawn, keeping watch. Are you there? Yes. Still, keep tapping. You did, until the snow stopped beating against the roof. No words were needed beyond that. Later you heard her transferred south, nearer the coast. The line never felt quite the same again. Rumors of voices. Years later they invented telephony. Voices traveling the same paths that once belonged to code. Operators gathered around the first receiver, awed and a little insulted. Some said it was witchcraft. Others said it was betrayal. To hear tone, breath, hesitation, to lose the clean abstraction of signal, felt almost indecent. You tried it once. The voice on the other end said your name aloud. It sounded too heavy, too close. You missed the distance. You missed the safety of not being seen by sound. The night of crossed wires. Every network has its ghosts. One evening the relay began echoing fragments of an unknown station. Old messages looping, dislocated from time. Coordinates, weather patterns. A ship long vanished from any harbor list. The others blamed faulty grounding. You knew better. It was the same feeling you had when letters from the past resurfaced from a desk drawer. Words that still carried the heat of the hand that wrote them. Electricity too remembers. You stayed long after your shift, tracing the echo until it faded into static. It never repeated. But the silence afterward felt more alive than before. The public messages. By day, telegrams arrived in stacks, engagements, condolences, invoices, gossip disguised as business. You read thousands without reading them, yet certain phrases etched themselves into memory. Arrived safe, stop child, recovering, stop, nothing to forgive, stop. The telegraph flattened all voices into the same tense neutrality, and yet you could still feel the trembling underneath. The clicking key became a confessional, its absolutions issued in code. You sometimes wondered if distance made people more honest, or less. A world knotted in wire by the 1880s. The earth resembled a spool. Cables crossed oceans. Poles multiplied like forests. Maps began marking lines instead of rivers. Messages traveled faster than thought, but hearts didn't keep up. Governments declared triumph. The world is connected. But connection, you'd learned, is not the same as closeness. In towns where the telegraph came, silence changed shape. It wasn't absence anymore. It was anticipation. People waited for messages the way they once waited for rain. An unexpected message. One slow dawn, years after you thought the rhythm had left your hands. A test tone flickered through your receiver. Old call letters. Impossible ones. South Line 13. For a long moment you couldn't breathe. The signal was faint, distorted, perhaps an atmospheric quirk, but the pattern was unmistakable. That same small extra dot at the end. You replied on instinct, sending your old signature in return. The line hissed, stuttered, fell quiet. No acknowledgement came. You sat perfectly still, afraid to break whatever fragile bridge had briefly formed. When the sun rose, the signal was gone. You told no one. Some messages, you decided, don't need witnesses. Language without end. Now the network is a museum piece. Students visit to hear authentic Morse, tapping like tourists imitating a forgotten prayer. You watch them with a fond sort of sorrow. They think the language died. It didn't. It transformed. Every glowing screen, every blinking cursor, all are descendants of that first pulse on a wire. Still rhythm, still distance pretending to be closeness. You rest your hand on the key one last time. The brass is cool, the contact points dull but obedient. You tap a single word, not in code, just in sound. It echoes through the quiet room, and seems to go on forever. You realize then that distance itself has always been an instrument, and every generation must learn how to play it. The room glows the color of tea left too long to steep. Gaslight softens everything. Edges of paper, brass of instruments, even your own reflection in the telegraph glass. You have been here since sunset, trading messages with towns you will never see. At midnight, the signal slows. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the great national current falters into drowsiness. Only the night operators remain, the quiet order of those who listen while others sleep. The office is a hive made of patience. Each sounder speaks in its private rhythm, faint clicks tumbling like water in pipes. You know them all by heart. To strangers it would seem chaos. To you it is prayer, voices of the wire across the system. A dozen unseen hands answer you. There is Mary at Carlisle who hums between transmissions. Joseph in Bristol whose code always hesitates on questions. A young lad in Dublin who sometimes adds a musical trill, his own invention, to mark the hour. You never met any of them, but you could find their cadence in a crowd. The wire has turned strangers into a single invisible choir. Carlisle to London, clear on 2, London ac Carlisle, route Hoding. The phrases repeat, formal as liturgy, yet beneath them hums affection born of repetition. The nation speaks through you, syllable by syllable, heartbeat by heartbeat. The lamp beyond the window. Every office keeps one lamp burning for travelers who might lose their way along the night road. Yours stands in the front window, magnified by glass so the flame appears doubled. Outside, fog curls against it, and sometimes a passerby pauses to watch. They see only a solitary light, not the network it belongs to. They do not know that the lamp's twin burns in another station 50 miles away, marking the same hour, shining the same weary gold. You think of those distant lamps as punctuation marks across the dark, commas of comfort in a sentence the nation is still learning to read. The clock that lied time behaves differently here. You learned long ago that the clock on the wall tells only part of the truth. The real hours are measured in transmissions, in the length of silence between messages. Some nights stretch forever because the lines stay empty. Others vanish in an instant of unbroken traffic. When dawn finally appears, it does so like an apology. Its light hesitant, guilty for arriving late. The accident report, at 1:43 a.m. NT signal, bursts through, urgent, jagged, unmistakable. You copy it automatically. Derailment north of the viaduct. Request for medical assistance. Relay to local constabulary. Hands fly. Pens scratch. The line becomes the nation's pulse of alarm. Within minutes, every operator from Leeds to London is awake. It is not tragedy that shakes you. It is the realization of connection. The wire carries fear faster than hope, but equally honest. By 2:10, the reply arrives. Assistance reached. Stop minor injuries. Stop line restored. The hum settles again. You exhale. Progress has mended itself, as it always does, leaving only the echo of what might have broken. Tea and electricity. Between messages, you brew the ritual cup. The kettle sits on a coal ring beside the switchboard, its steam mixing with static. The taste is metallic, slightly bitter, the flavor of midnight discipline. A droplet lands on your thumb, sizzling faintly. You smile. Electricity and tea, the twin fuels of empire. Outside, frost webs, the telegraph wires until they glitter like silver handwriting. Somewhere a horse snorts. Its echo joins the rhythm of the keys. You drink slowly, letting warmth return through your wrists, through the same veins that have memorized the code. Messages that were never sent. Every operator keeps a few messages that never reached their destinations. Some failed in storms. Others were censored or forgotten in ledgers. You keep yours in a drawer. Small slips of yellow paper with incomplete phrases. Come home, stop, mother found work in Brist. If you still no one claimed them, you cannot throw them away. Each carries the ghost of an intention, unfinished prayers to the machinery of chance. Sometimes you imagine answering them. You tap a single word back into the line. Received. No one replies, but it feels like closing a door gently instead of slamming it. The stranger who listened one winter, a vagabond, began appearing outside your window after midnight. He never begged or spoke. He simply stood under the lamp watching the flicker of your fingers. For weeks he returned, always at the same hour. Finally you stepped outside with a spare mug of tea. He said he once worked the line before drink ruined his nerves. Now he came to hear what he called the old heartbeat. You let him stand by the open door while you worked. When you tapped the phrase, "Oh well," he nodded as though it were meant for him. Then spring came, and he stopped appearing. The night felt slightly larger without him. The experiment around 3 a.m. The engineer arrived with a new device, a relay that could send automatic messages faster than any human. He demonstrated proudly. Perfect rhythm, flawless transmission, tireless. The sound was horrifying. It lacked breath, hesitation, mercy. The room filled with mechanical perfection, and everyone stood silent, mourning something not yet lost. When he left, you unplugged it quietly. The wires sighed with relief. You continued by hand, slower but alive. The shared dawn by 4:30. The horizon bruises into light. From every station, good mornings begin to drift through the lines. Short, polite, wordless acknowledgements that another night has survived itself. You answer each one. It feels like closing shutters after a long vigil. The first train passes the office, its steam glowing pink in the sunrise. You rest your head against the window pane and let the hum of its wheels merge with the lingering clicks of code. Two rhythms, one intention, motion. You think of the thousands of miles of wire stretching beneath that dawn, the invisible river of connection still flowing between strangers who will never meet. The operator's prayer. Before you leave, you perform the oldest ritual. Disconnect, ground, cover. You whisper, half in jest, half in reverence. May the line hold, may the signal carry, may no message be forgotten. Your hand lingers on the key. It feels warm, like an answered prayer. Reflection. The others will arrive soon. Day shift. Inspectors, messengers with breakfast news. You will walk home through streets that do not know they have been watched over all night. The sky above the wires fades from ink to smoke to silver. Each pole stands like a punctuation mark against the new paragraph of day. You realize that every message sent tonight, love, fear, routine, was only another way of saying the same thing. We are still here. You smile at the thought and close the ledger. Outside, the last lamp gutters out, releasing a thin ribbon of smoke. It looks for a heartbeat, like a signal still rising. The first quiet it began without warning. One night the line simply stopped. No click, no spark, no faint pulse along the brass. Only the breathing of the lamps and the faint settling of the timber roof. You checked every switch, every coil, every joint, and found them sound. But the air had changed. It was as if the nation itself had paused mid-sentence and forgotten what it was saying. The other stations must have felt it too, but no one sent a message. Silence is contagious. It moves faster than signal, fills every gap more perfectly than sound ever could. You sat still, fingers on the key, waiting for some stray tap from the north or the west. None came. Only the clock ticked. Suddenly an intruder in its own house. The room felt larger than it ever had before. The habit of noise. For years you lived by rhythm. The wire tapped through your waking and your sleeping. The Morse becoming heartbeat. Prayer, lullaby. Now the rhythm is gone, and your body does not know how to behave. You tap unconsciously, on the table, on your sleeve, on the porcelain rim of your mug. Small, nervous repetitions of a language that no one is speaking back. Even your footsteps on the floor seem too slow. The lamps hum faintly. That sound becomes your new conversation. You never realized how full the silence would be. Not absence, but a kind of echo made of everything the sound used to hide. The rustle of your coat, the creak of your chair, the sigh your lungs make when they realize they have time to breathe. The room has not died, it has only remembered itself. The visitor from headquarters morning brings a man in a grey overcoat. He carries a clipboard and a voice like unfinished sentences. Experimental maintenance, he explains. Lines are being consolidated. Temporary disruption. You nod as though this were an ordinary thing. He doesn't notice the dust already settling on the keys. He doesn't see how clean silence looks after a night of use. Before he leaves, he adds, "There'll be a break in service for a few days. Take some rest for once." Rest as though stillness were a luxury you had never tasted. You almost thank him for giving you permission to stop existing in motion. But you only nod again. When he goes, the silence expands to fill the doorway behind him. The daylight without purpose. By midday the light lies thick on the instruments. You never saw them clearly before, always half-glimpsed through lamplight or shadow. Now every knob, every screw, every hairline scratch shows itself with a sort of embarrassed honesty. The brass dulls under too much clarity. The once golden coils look tired, human. You sweep the dust for no reason. You align the pencils, trim the wicks, clean the panes. Tasks used to have context, each movement part of the chain of communication. Now they are simply gestures of muscle memory. At last you sit down and do nothing. It is a stranger kind of labor. To keep from moving requires its own discipline. The echo room. The telegraph hall after a day of silence feels like a cathedral after its congregation has gone home. You can still sense what happened here. The urgency, the faith, the unspoken communion of work. In the far corner, an abandoned overcoat slumps over a chair, one sleeve outstretched as though still reaching for the key. The floor smells faintly of oil and wet stone. Every sound you make bounces off the walls and comes back changed, translated by space. When the wind enters through the cracked window, the wires overhead hum faintly. You almost believe they are trying to speak again. A phantom message, half-born and half-remembered. You whisper the old call sign into the air. The silence answers with a sigh shaped exactly like your own. The town without noise outside. The world has slowed to match the lines. Horses clop without urgency. Smoke rises lazily from chimneys. The post office clock seems to hesitate between seconds. The tavern owner complains that business is quiet since the telegrams stopped. No news, he says, polishing a glass that's already clean. People get restless when they don't hear anything from anywhere. You sip your tea and nod. It occurs to you that the entire town was addicted to sound, to the idea that someone somewhere was always awake. Without that reassurance, the night feels longer, the walls closer. When you leave, you see a child holding a wire scrap he found by the road. He twangs it like a string and laughs at the faint tone. For him, the hum is still music. The letters during the quiet. You begin writing letters you will never send. Not telegrams, proper letters, with sentences that take their time. You write to other operators, to the rivers you once crossed, to the machines themselves. You even write to the silence, thanking it for being honest. You are not emptiness. You write. You are space. The ink smells of metal. When it dries, you stack the pages neatly and place them in the drawer where the unsent telegrams used to live. Different shapes of the same confession. We are still trying to speak. The sound returns. It happens one night while you are half asleep at the desk. A single tap, then another, soft, hesitant, like a heart remembering how to beat. You stare at the key, unsure whether it moved or whether you imagined it. Then the line crackles, faint, uneven, and the familiar rhythm begins. The code is erratic, full of gaps. You copy what you can. Test, stop, new route. Established, stop. Relief floods the room. You answer, hands trembling slightly. London receiving, stop, hold line. The clicks come steady now, confident. The system has healed itself, but it sounds different, thinner somehow, like a song sung in a new voice. The changed language morning reveals the reason. The engineer returns, carrying a new device smaller than a bread box. Improved relay, he says. More efficient, more reliable. He attaches it, tightens the screws, wipes his hands. When it starts, the rhythm is exact, too exact. There is no space between beats, no breath, no fatigue. You realize, listening, that this is not your rhythm anymore. The sound that once resembled life now imitates perfection. It feels colder, though the air is warm. You sit beside it, waiting for a mistake that will never come. Machines, when they learn to speak flawlessly, stop talking to you. The unsent goodbye. That night, you compose one final message, not for transmission, but for yourself. Each word deliberate, each pause a small ceremony. To all who once listened, the line has changed. We are still here. The sound is different, but it means the same thing. Keep the faith of attention. You fold it, seal it, and place it beneath the brass key. Let it rest there, a ghost resting in its old bed. The room seems to exhale. The silence that follows isn't empty this time. It's complete. The river again outside. The river carries its quiet music under the moon. Wires hang above it, like strings of a forgotten instrument. You lean on the railing, hands in pockets, and listen. The hum is faint, woven into the night air, a mixture of memory and new current. It's impossible to tell which is which. For a moment, you imagine every sound ever sent still traveling. Faint echoes circling the earth, bouncing between clouds and oceans. A permanent, invisible aurora of thought. Somewhere perhaps, one of your old signals still wanders. And maybe, just maybe, someone will answer it. Reflection silence is not the opposite of communication. It is its resting pulse. The night operators taught you that. Every message, every hum, every spark had to rest eventually. Not in death, but in stillness. The long silence was never the end of the line. It was the wire breathing in before speaking again. You close the door behind you and walk home. The street is empty, but you can almost hear the air adjusting to your footsteps. Small clicks of sound spacing themselves out like code. Somewhere far off, a faint bell rings 6 times. You smile, even silence, it seems, needs punctuation. And the night, vast, listening, forgiving, answers with nothing at all, which finally feels like everything. The quiet building. You notice it one morning on your walk. A new sign screwed to the door of what used to be the relay office. National Museum of Communication. Coming soon. The paint is still wet. The letters glisten like fresh signal pulses caught in daylight. Behind the glass, the old desks are gone, replaced by planks and ladders. Men in overalls painting the walls are too clean white. You stand outside for a long time, feeling oddly relieved that the building is being spoken to again. Buildings, like people, prefer conversation, even if it's renovation. When one of the workmen steps out for a smoke, you ask what it will be. He shrugs. A museum, they said. Something about heritage, old telegraphs, phones, all that. He exhales blue smoke into blue air. Nice, isn't it? Keeps the place alive. Alive. You nod, though you know the word means something different to him than it once did to you. Glass and memory. Months later, you return when the museum finally opens. The walls smell faintly of varnish and cardboard. A polite attendant greets you with rehearsed warmth and hands you a ticket stamped with a date, proof, as all history demands, that you were here now. Inside, glass cases stand where operators once sat. Each one contains a single relic, a key, a reel of wire, a notebook half erased by time. Small labels whisper beneath them. Brass telegraph key 1872, recovered from Leeds station. Operator's logbook, ink and sweat on paper. Insulator glass, standard issue for rural lines. You lean close and see your own reflection layered over the artifacts. A ghost looking at fossils. The lighting is careful, almost devotional. It bathes every relic in an even holy calm. Museums, you realize, are chapels where time prays to itself. The guide's voice. A young guide begins the tour. He speaks brightly, words clicking like polished marbles. Before telephones and wireless, there was the electric telegraph. It changed the pace of the world, made distance smaller, made nations feel awake together. He gestures toward a line of instruments mounted on the wall. The operators worked in shifts around the clock, he explains, linking town to town. His hands trace invisible wires in the air, and you feel the old rhythm return. The pattern of contact, the invisible thread that once ran through you. He continues. It was like the internet of its day. Visitors nod approvingly. A few take photos. The click of camera shutters replaces the sound of keys. Progress, you think, is mostly a change in vocabulary. Hands under glass. You stop at a display of operator photographs. Sepia faces half smiling under long exposure. Beneath each portrait lies a pair of cotton gloves for school children to try on. A sign reads, "Imagine their hands." You slip one glove on, feeling faintly foolish. The cloth is too small for your fingers. Still, you tap the glass once, habit refusing extinction. The sound is dull, absorbed instantly by the display case. The guide notices, "You used to work with these, didn't you?" You nod. He brightens, eager for authenticity. "Would you like to show the group how it sounded?" You hesitate, then press one finger rhythmically against the glass. Tap, tap, pause, tap. The old code lives in the motion, even if the sound is gone. Children lean forward, fascinated, not by the history, but by your steadiness. You stop before the rhythm finishes. The silence that follows feels correct, the natural punctuation to all explanations. The archive room downstairs, a door marked archive, staff only stands half open. Through the gap you see shelves of ledgers, boxes labeled restoration materials. A faint hum of dehumidifiers fills the air, modern machines guarding older ones. A curator, grey-haired and gentle, invites you in when he notices your stare. Former operator, he guesses. You nod again. He leads you through narrow aisles, dust motes swirling like coded signals. He opens one box and removes a stack of yellowed message strips tied with string. Most of these are blank, he says. Paper was reused, ink faded. He offers one. You unfold it carefully. Faint graphite lines cross the surface like veins in marble. You can almost feel the pressure of the stylus that once pressed there, a ghost of communication. You'd be surprised how much the paper remembers, he says. You answer softly, "Not really." Sound exhibit. In another room, small speakers hide in the walls. Every few minutes they click to life, playing recorded Morse through the air. Visitors listen, smiling at the quaintness of it. You stand still and close your eyes. The rhythm is too clean, recorded in a studio, stripped of fatigue, stripped of heart. It lacks the tiny hesitations, the almost breaths between beats that once belonged to human hand. But beneath the perfection you hear something else, a faint room tone, the hum of equipment, the whisper of old air. It comforts you. Even imitation carries echo. The donation, at the far end of the hall, a clerk sits behind a wooden desk labeled Acquisitions. Visitors donate family relics, telegrams, insulators, pocket notebooks. You hesitate, then reach into your coat pocket. The small brass key you kept all these years. It still fits the shape of your palm. You set it on the desk. The clerk's eyes widen. Genuine. You nod. He takes it carefully, gloved fingers reverent. "We'll catalogue it. It'll be seen." You fill out the form. Donor. Anonymous. The word feels right. The line always valued anonymity. Only messages mattered. When you leave the desk, your hand feels oddly lighter, as if something invisible had finally exhaled. The display of silence. The next gallery surprises you. It contains nothing. A plaque on the wall reads, "This room is dedicated to the silence between messages." Visitors whisper uncertainly. Children run through it, because there is nothing to break. You sit on the bench in the center and close your eyes. At first it feels empty. Then gradually you hear the breathing of the building, pipes ticking, timbers settling, air moving. It's the same music you once listened to between transmissions. You smile. The museum has built an exhibit you understand perfectly. The river window. The upper floor opens to a tall arched window overlooking the river. Beyond the glass, water slides beneath the same bridges you once crossed at dawn. Sunlight strikes the current, scattering in long gold fragments. Next to the window stands a single artifact, a section of telegraph wire stretched taut between two wooden posts. Label recovered from the South Line, 1886. You trace its shadow across the floor. It runs directly toward the river. It feels right that the line and the water still travel in parallel, one carrying messages, the other time. You imagine the river listening to this quiet building and nodding in agreement. Evening closing as the museum empties, the lights dim to their night mode, a low amber glow that reminds you of lamplight over a quay. The guide thanks you for visiting, his voice soft now that the crowd is gone. "Was it how you remembered?" he asks. You answer, "Not exactly, but close enough to listen." He looks puzzled but smiles. "Come back anytime." You walk toward the door. For a moment you hear the recorded Morse begin again in the distance. The pattern is slow, measured, almost sleepy. You count the beats and realize it spells a single word: rest. After hours outside, the night is clear. Through the museum window, you can see the clerk placing your key into a case. He does it carefully, arranging the brass against black velvet. For the first time in decades, your work is behind glass. Safe, still, understood by no one and everyone at once. You stand on the street until the lights go out, one by one. A single lamp remains above the door, its glow reflected in the river. The reflection flickers as if someone were tapping beneath the surface. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's thanks. The letter you don't send at home. You take out your notebook and write one last entry. "To whomever stands watch after us. We spoke in sparks and pauses. We listened more than we spoke. What you see in glass was once a heartbeat. Keep it alive by listening well." You tear the page out and place it beside the candle. The flame leans toward it, as if reading. Then you fold the paper and slide it into the drawer where the others rest. Not to be displayed, only to be remembered. Reflection museums cannot keep the past alive. They can only teach the present to breathe more slowly. As you lie awake that night, you realize the operators were never replaced, only translated. Every screen, every signal, every tiny dot and dash on a modern device is still their language, just spoken faster. Outside, a late train passes, its rhythm steady and kind. You tap a finger against the sheet in time with it. Old habit, old comfort, and before you drift into sleep, you imagine the museum dark and quiet, the cases glowing faintly from within, as if every artifact was still sending a signal too soft for machines to catch, but clear enough for memory to receive. The night listens. It always has. Night has settled over the river again. Not the old kind of night, thick with work and wire song, but a gentler one, softer around the edges, slower in its breathing, as though time itself is finally willing to sit down and rest. The museum lights glow behind the glass, small as watchful eyes, and somewhere inside, the last message of an age waits to be delivered. You stand on the bridge for a long while before going in. The boards beneath your feet are damp, the current below whispering its patient, unhurried language. Years ago, that sound would have been drowned beneath the relentless pulse of the telegraph lines overhead. Wood creaking, iron humming, the faint tremble of voltage riding the dark. Now the wires are quiet. The river is louder than the machines ever were. You breathe in the cold air, and for a moment you imagine the old network waking again, a faint spark traveling down a forgotten key. a single dot or dash flaring like a firefly in the dark. A greeting, a farewell, something small but alive. But the world doesn't repeat its inventions, it builds new ones. So you cross the bridge and head toward the museum. Inside the quiet, the door's hinges complain softly as you step inside. The space is dim, illuminated only by small lamps positioned above the displays. They cast warm halos over brass keys and coils of wire, creating pools of light in an otherwise darkened hall. The place feels empty. Though you know the night guard is somewhere upstairs making his rounds, your steps are slow, respectful. There is something solemn about walking through a place where sound once lived. The exhibits seem to watch you. Glass cases glimmer, brass gleams even in the low light, remembering touch long after the hands that touched it have gone still. You pause before one case in particular, a small, unimpressive key mounted on a velvet square. Its brass is worn completely smooth at the contact point, where fingers pressed night after night. The placard reads, Morse key, C1870, used on the overnight line between Warren, Brookhaven and Old River Station. Operator unknown. Night workers were never recorded for their presence, only for their absence. When their hands failed, you press 2 fingers to the glass, feeling its cold answer. Once, you could have tapped a message through that barrier. Once, the whole world would have answered. The last operator's desk. At the far end of the hall sits a single restored workstation. A desk of darkened pine, oil-scarred and wavering with age. A lamp burns low beside it, illuminating the key and sounder in a circle of amber. A small sign invites visitors to sit. You lower yourself into the chair slowly, as though taking someone else's place. The wood creaks under your weight, a familiar complaint, a voice from the old life greeting you without judgment. Your hands hover over the key, the muscle memory is still there. Dot, dash, dot dot dash, like breath. You don't press it, not yet. Instead you close your eyes and listen, to nothing, to everything. The quiet here is not the absence of sound, it is the presence of all the nights that came before. Every transmission that crossed a continent, every urgent message routed through a storm, every coded note between lonely souls hundreds of miles apart, they all seem to shape the silence. The quiet feels full. You imagine absurdly that if you tapped one message now, someone out there, someone leaning over some desk, someone awake in a distant town might still hear it. But telegraph wires no longer bind the world, invisible currents have replaced them. Distance no longer waits for dots and dashes to be decoded. Even so, the longing remains. Not for the machinery, but for the conversation. You run your hands along the desk, tracing the places where varnish has been worn away by decades of leaning elbows and tired wrists. When you slide your fingers beneath the edge of the drawer, something brushes them lightly. Paper. You pull it free, a folded scrap tucked carefully into the wood. Someone must have found it during restoration and left it there intentionally, unsure whether it belonged to the exhibit or to the life that produced it. You unfold it gently. The handwriting is cramped but careful. If anyone finds this, we heard each other, that was enough. No date, no signature. You fold the note again, place it back where it was. Some things do not belong behind glass. The listening room. You rise and move toward the museum's smallest room. A narrow chamber designed for one purpose, to let visitors hear what the night once sounded like. A sign on the door reads, "Please enter alone." You do. Inside, the darkness is almost complete. A single wooden bench sits beneath a cone of faint light. Speakers are hidden in the walls, their presence only revealed when the room begins to breathe, not with wind, not with music, but with the soft, rhythmic tapping you once lived by. Dot dot dot, dash, dot. A message you don't bother translating. Meaning is not the point. This is the heartbeat of another time. Not nostalgic, not mournful. Just present. You sit with it. Let it wash through you. The room feels holy in its simplicity. Once, these sounds built cities. Once, they shaped the pace of a nation. Now they are archived, curated, softened for modern ears. But something essential remains. A pulse. A reminder. When the tapping finishes, the room dims back into silence. You exhale slowly and stand. Some part of you stays on the bench. The river window. At the far end of the museum is a tall arched window overlooking the river. You walk toward it, guided by the faint sheen of moonlight on the floor. When you reach it, you press both hands to the cool stone sill and look out. The river moves steadily, carrying reflections of lamps, clouds, and the faint outline of telegraph poles that no longer pulse with life. You imagine all the signals that once passed above that water, thousands upon thousands of sentences strung like constellations across the night. You whisper a single word into the glass, not loud enough to echo, but enough to exist. Still, a small breath fogs the pain. Closing time. The guard finds you there. He approaches quietly, apologetic. "Sorry," he says. "We're closing for the night." You nod. He doesn't hurry you. He seems to understand that leaving these rooms is not simply a matter of time, but of permission. When you finally move past him toward the exit, he nods once, respectful in a way that feels older than his age. Outside, the door shuts behind you with a soft thump, the kind of sound that used to travel down the telegraph line as vibration. You stand for a moment on the step. The air is colder now, the river louder, the museum darker, but the night feels connected. Not by wires, not by code, not by machinery, by memory, by the simple fact that someone once spoke into the dark and someone else answered. Your footsteps echo on the stones, clear as a single dot or a single dash. You think of how many workers walked these same paths, eyes heavy, breath slow, fingers still tingling from keys, some of them gone a century now, some remembered only by ledger numbers, some remembered not at all, and yet you feel them here, not as ghosts, as continuity, as the invisible infrastructure of human persistence. The world they connected still hums, though its wires have changed. You pause at the center of the bridge. The river moves beneath you like a long breath drawn in sleep. You rest your hand on the railing and close your eyes. The final transmission. When you open them, the words rise unbidden, not spoken, not tapped, not meant for any receiver. Just a message to the night itself. I am still here. No dots, no dashes, no need for voltage or wire, just breath and intention. A message delivered not across distance but across time. The river carries it. The quiet keeps it. The night allows it. Because even with the lines gone dark, even with the last operator long retired, even with the keys sealed under museum glass, the impulse remains. To send, to reach, to be heard. You breathe in the cold air and let it out slowly, like the last note of a long symphony. Then you turn and walk home. Behind you the museum settles. The river murmurs. The empty lines above sway slightly in the wind. Nothing more than wires now, but still shaped like possibility. And somewhere, in the deep quiet between lamplight and memory, the world holds its breath for a moment, as if waiting for one final reply.